Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. We have some returning guests and a new friend here today. Welcome back, Reese Harper from Dentist Advisors, the Dentist Money Show. How are you doing, Reese?
Great, Richard. Excited to be here with you and my friend Will.
Will Gochnour, welcome to the show. You've been my advisor now. Am I allowed to say that on air, Reese?
Yeah.
You've been my advisor for 4 or 6 months. Was it pre-COVID?
It was like right during COVID. It felt like,
yeah, I think so.
March area.
And I just learned how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, it's good. It's a tough one. So
yeah,
we're here though. So
welcome
for
to the
those
show.
of you who don't know, it's because Will's name is spelled a little weird, not because Richard can't spell.
I can't read English. I'm from Canada.
He's a smart guy. He really is.
It's spelled Gochnour. I was like, is it Gochnour? And he's like, not at all.
It might have been at some point when my ancestors were in France.
Gochnour.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. So, Reese, you sounded a little tired. It seems like you've been on like 20 Zoom calls in a row today, I'm assuming.
If you really want to know the truth, Richard, my calendar is blocked off in 30-minute increments. And I go back to back from about 9:30 to 5 every day. So it moves fast. I think I had 11 so far today. So I get to meet a lot of new people, and that's a lot of fun. So my job is people can only handle me in small doses. And so that's why I have a lot of appointments.
Which is why I scheduled you for an hour and a half, because I have a lot more. That's good.
Will can only handle me like once a month.
Now you're good for October.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm stoked to chat today because Will and I both come from different sides of the advisory spectrum. Will's a brilliant young CFP that's been working with us at Dentist Advisors for a while. And, he's one of my favorite people, honestly. He's really thoughtful, good relationship manager, the kind of person, he's very responsive. So when you work with any kind of service provider, you hope that they're easy to talk to and that they're responsive, which is kind of your number one quality. But is also someone that passes CFP without having to take it again. So it's like passing your boards once and not having to retake them. So nice. He's a smart kid. All right.
Well,
thanks, Reese. I'm blessed.
I second all those things. I would add that he cares. Like you want someone who like cares about you and what's going on.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You guys can keep going. Anything else?
Yeah, this is your first podcast. Most podcasts don't usually start off with people just like talking.
That was great.
About you.
Yeah.
So, usually it's like reading your bio or something, but you both know me, so that helps.
I can't read bios. I get too bored. So let's get started. Let's talk about growing practices. So this is a season on growth. And in particular, we've talked a lot about practice models, both single doc offices, a solo practice where you're the owner. Sometimes you're doing a startup and you're having to grow this from zero to where you want it to be. Or sometimes you bought an underperforming practice and you're having to scale it up and ramp it up. And then also another model of a multi-doc practice, a group practice with, 2 or 3 dentists, maybe more. And sometimes people will transition between the two. And we've got a lot of that going on in this season. We've talked a lot about this. So I wanted to see, first off, talking about those different models. As financial advisors, you guys have access to data in terms of like, you've advised a lot of different dentists in a lot of different practice situations. In general, one of our hypotheses for this season is that the economies of scale by having 2 or 3 doctors under one roof tend to make it a little bit more profitable than if you were to have 3 different offices and 1 dentist in each one. And there's some aspect of your fixed costs that once you've hit those and cleared those, any growth and addition that you've added onto it becomes pretty lucrative pretty quick, and turns out being to be a great model for growing your financial wealth. Have you seen that? Does that hold true that like, okay,
I was going to ask you about that. Like, do you have data on that, or is that an assumption?
We have just data.
Yeah.
Your data.
Yeah, no, I would say that definitely in theory, that is for sure true. Okay. Like definitely it's true in theory, but and in practice, I would say the majority of the time it's true. I don't know to what degree above 50% that's the case, but it is the case the majority of the time.
That can be true, is what you're saying.
Yes. when it tends not to be true is that when you add multiple personalities with multiple preferences, sometimes the staffing model and the overhead choices that different providers have makes it difficult for everyone to kind of uniformly come around we'll call it like an MVP solution, and like a simple, low cost, kind of efficient cost structure, because people have different preferences. And so sometimes you'll see, although you would assume that the overhead would be lower because you have some aspect of fixed cost that gets driven down, sometimes you have more human capital costs than you thought you would have, or you have different preferences in supply costing, and that actually creates some inefficiency. Or maybe your marketing preferences are slightly different, or you have a few different variables that you can kind of have conflict around in a practice. And so I tend to see that happen more than, at least initially in the first couple of years, especially as people are like working together.
Sure.
And then over time, I feel like they can settle into a little bit more efficiencies. But this is something I've probably seen a few times more than other advisors in our firm, just because I started, earliest, and a lot of my clients tend to be either post DSO exit or late stage development. And so I'm kind of like I'm particularly informed about when it has worked and when it hasn't. And so anyway,
that's great, because there's not a lot of people who say, hey, I know lots of dentists who have multi-doc offices or have been through some phase of this at some point in time. I would say something else we've seen is that kind of office, because you do have a larger fixed expense floor, you can have bigger swings of like 1 month you have you're covering your costs and there's not much left over, and then you have a great month the next month and you crush it and you're knocking it out of the park. Is that something you've seen as well, or is that just me making up crap?
Will, do you have any thoughts on that? Some of your practices are in kind of hyper growth, early stage mode, adding associates and kind of expanding. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I mean, we run like in-depth cash flow analysis for all our clients at regular intervals throughout the year. And as part of our, financial planning process, the elements process, we're constantly looking at how cash flow is varying from month to month, because as you well know, the cash flow of a dentist is pretty unpredictable. Good months, bad months, everything in between. And I would say you're right. As soon as you hit that point of fixed costs, and then you kind of have the variable as production and and how the different doctors have performed during that month, I would say your highs are higher and your lows are lower depending on how the month goes. And so that definitely makes sense. And that's why it's super important to have a good cash flow plan, because it's not very predictable on when you're going to bring in, double what you were expecting, or not bring in, even close to what you were expecting. And, it's important to know, what do you do with that leftover money, and at what time is it smartest to, have it being averaged into an investment or putting it back into the practice and whatnot. So.
Yeah. And I would just probably add to this. That's good insight, Will. I feel like before someone makes a choice on a multi-doctor single location, we'll call it practice, versus staying as a sole proprietor, that's probably confusing. When I say sole proprietor, I mean single doctor office. I think that they just have totally different dynamics. The feel of these practices are very different. And so in my experience, sometimes decision-making is actually slower in the multi-doctor group, single location. You have 3 people making decisions, or even 2 people making decisions. And then sometimes it's hard to like get your heads together and make a decision. I mean, you take it as simple as another example would be like you buy a rental property and share it with a friend. And you both say, I'm going to buy this cabin out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm going to decide, you get it for a week, I get it for a week, back and forth. And you got to decide on now how to buy a couch. And you're both going to split it 50-50.
Right.
Well, like some people like 40-inch deep couches, some people like 32-inch deep couches, some people want a sectional, some people want a love seat and a couple of chairs, some people like fabric, some people like leather, some people like it 10 feet from the TV, some people want it 14 feet back. Like buying a couch.
This personal experience?
Okay? This is
coming from personal experience, Reese?
Personal experience this week. All right. Just kidding. So like every choice you make when you have a partner, whether it's in dentistry or outside of dentistry, it slows the decision-making process down just enough to where sometimes I just think it's important not to introduce that variable too early on in someone's career development. Because, you don't know who you are yet. You don't know how you want to practice. You don't know what you value. You don't know how much lifestyle balance you want versus income. Like you're still trying to figure out who you are. If you interject 3 chiefs or 3 decision makers into the equation or 2 or 5 or, however many, sometimes it just slows your path towards growth. It doesn't mean that one of the people was right. It just means that they all would have done things just a little bit differently. And so consequently, instead of like getting to a destination quickly, it just takes a little bit longer. And I think it's important to, consider that. At what point does it make sense to put more cooks in the kitchen? So
absolutely. Well, and so this kind of goes back to something. I don't know if we've discussed this on air this season or not, or in a different season. There was a time period where multi-practice was like made out to be the thing. By some dental podcasts out there, and
like multi-producer, single location, or multi-location, you mean?
Multi-location.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And it kind of like came to the forefront between, forums and some in-person seminars and some podcasts like that became.
Well, it sounds good, right? It's like in our biology is like territorial conquesting, like Genghis Khan, traveling all throughout Europe and putting a stake in the ground with a new flag. And this is my new land.
Sounds so cool.
It's cool, right? It just feels great. It's like I got a new hill that I get to like conquer, So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's a biological kind of thing too.
It is. There's momentum to it. And I think for a lot of people, some people are interested in the roll up and cash out type strategy. Some people are just looking at doing this long term and having multi-practice long term, but it kind of got put up as this like status / wealth accumulation strategy, and I think between myself and others and some data points, that's good for some people, but not for most people. And there's a lot of challenges with that model, and I won't get into that too much right here. But I think we also right now on our podcast, George's multi-doc practice for our podcast has become this like thing that a lot of people want. And George does a really good job of talking about all the advantages of it. So I'm often backpedaling and saying, well, no, you can still crush it and do great in a single doc office that is, well run and streamlined, and you've grown into it. And so I guess I would ask you, Will, I feel like you've seen a lot of your clients recently who've either done startups, done acquisitions, who are younger in their career. Do you think that's still a great model for building wealth and being successful?
It's honestly, yes. We've seen so many cases where you can get up to where you were expecting to be very quickly. I've seen startups that have gotten off the ground super fast. And this isn't obviously every case, but, I do believe that like just from projections perspective, because we run a lot of projections from our clients, like if you can understand like where they're trying to go, then you can kind of do the reverse engineering and figure out what it's going to take to get there. And a lot of times it doesn't take as much as you really think it needs to take. And so I liked when you said that it was maybe more of like a status symbol, like power play, rather than like really what needs to happen in order to reach your goals. And so we put such a focus on like, all right, you want to retire at this age, or you want to be done making work optional at this age. What do you need to do to get there? And then we just work backwards with the data. And so for us, it's super important to see like, where are you at, where are you headed, and what that means for your future. And so, if your income is already up around $300,000 and you started your practice 2 years ago, and you're thrilled with your lifestyle, you're thrilled with where you're going, you're saving a very healthy percentage of your income, and you're not in any hurry to get done working early, and you also maybe don't have the personality of like, I need to like blow the roof off this thing, then there's really no reason to do anything, right? And so it totally comes down. We've seen so many successful single location, single doctor practices. I mean, I would say right now, just because a lot of our clients at Dentist Advisors are in the accumulator phase, so they're on the sort of younger end of their career. Maybe not Reese's clients, but most of our other advisors work with middle-aged dentists that are building their careers. I would say the majority of them are single doc practices, and we're not finding that the majority of them are struggling. So take that for what it's worth, but it's a very healthy career. You don't, I wouldn't say don't rush into any of these decisions to just buy a practice to buy a separate practice sake, and, figure out what your goals are and where you're headed first before you decide to make these decisions.
Perfect. Love it. Reese,
Yeah, I want to add to that, because Will, I think that what Will's saying, I completely agree with. And I'd like to add that this decision is largely it's a personality driven decision. The more I've seen this in financial advisors, we have a business that, some advisors are comfortable as associates. Some advisors want to start their own practice and control their own destiny, like come hell or high water, like that's what they want to do. And some advisors are, more about acquisitions and there's all mergers is the big thing in financial advisors. All these mergers that are going on. So there's always, in every industry, there's consolidation happening. There's business kind of, we'll call it boutique kind of operations, like Dentist Advisors, that are kind of happening out there. And then there's associate advisors or associate dentists, and I really don't think that, like, I have a strong conviction now, after seeing a lot of different data, that in any of these three models, like whether you're an associate, whether you're a single location owner that's a boutique style single location with a few associates, or whether you're multi-location or multi-doctor single location, like there's definitely financial success, like extraordinary financial success in any of the models. You just have to be like aware of which model you're in, and your practice has to design the career path properly to support you in that model. If you're going to be an associate advisor, like the practice has to be built to support that, and they have to be willing to compensate you well and provide you with good resources and help you get off the ground and make sure that you're successful. And if that's the case, I know plenty of associates, the majority of the dental industry, over the next 10 years is going to be comfortable working as an associate, and they're going to earn a really high income, and they're going to have very little debt and very little complexity. It's just a very efficient path towards accumulating wealth. And you don't have to, like, these are technically capable people. Like, the market isn't going to be able to drive down wages like dramatically forever. I mean, these people, eventually it's going to boil down to who's the one doing the work, and are they compensated well enough to want to go get those student loans? And you're going to see a mean reversion in incomes. It's like, right now, maybe some of these DSOs and corporations have the upper hand because they can kind of control things, and there's a lot of insurance penetration, and it kind of convolutes the pricing. But when the consumer finally gets to pick which dentist they want to go to, and it's real clear, which is where I think the market's headed, like probably less PPO penetration, more fee for service, more transparency around fees. Like, when you're paying for your provider, you want the best provider, and that person's going to ultimately get compensated well, or the client, the patient, is going to move to another provider. And so I just wouldn't, like, always make the decision based on personality, always make it based on preference, but always stretch yourself just a little bit more in whichever career path you're in, because the best associates are the ones that are stretching themselves and pushing a little bit harder than other associates. And the best single location doctors are the ones pushing themselves a little further. And same thing with the DSOs, same thing with the multi-location, sole props. You just got to push a little harder, but don't put yourself in a model that's like violating kind of your internal boundaries that work for your own life, because nothing is worth, that. So.
Okay. And I love it, because it's like you're choosing your problems. What model do you want? What problems do you want to have? Do you want to have, single doc problems of, clinical problems and a small team and lower overhead, or do you want to have multiple doctors in the same office and a much bigger team, much bigger overhead, bigger budgets on marketing, and a lot of decision making, a lot of systems? Um, and I think one of the easiest delineations is: do you want to be more chair side and less business oriented? And if that's the case, then I think single doc, either as an associate or as a owner of a single practice, with no other doctors, that's kind of the default. Like that's where most people should start. And then if you realize, you know what, maybe I want to be chairside less often, and I like this business stuff. I like managing people. I like growing. I like putting systems in place. I kind of like the risk reward of a bigger practice. Then that's when you start looking at doing other things. But I think the default across the board should be that solo doc. How about some tips for growth? So, Will, have you, seeing startup clients and acquisition clients that, are, this show, we're focused mainly on the practice owners more so than associates.
Yeah.
How have you seen them grow their practice, or what would you recommend people not doing based on some situations you've seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one of the things that I've seen in the majority of cases is just a lot of times growth happens for newer doctors that are just either acquiring or starting up. A lot of growth happens when you're not really expecting it. Like you're just doing the right thing. You're showing up every day and you're putting your shoulder to the wheel and just pushing along and making it happen. And so, the growth kind of comes out of nowhere, especially for some startups where all of a sudden you're looking back and you're saying, whoa, we just did our best month and then continuing to increase. And then all of a sudden you're at this point where you're looking back and you're saying, how do we get there? And, hopefully that's happening to you, because that's a great thing and a good problem to have. What we find is during these phases of growth, it's really easy to neglect some of the basics of your financial picture. And we see this a lot just because usually the doctors coming to us when they're saying, and they've hit the point where they're like, holy cow, I'm making all this money. I don't know how the heck I got here. And I'm like, I don't know where any of my financial stuff is. And I've got all these loans, and I'm to the point where I'm feeling unorganized and I don't know what to do with my money. And that's where it's like crucial for us to dive in and say like, all right, first things first, we got to get you organized. Second, we got to make some decisions, because without organization of the data, we can't really make any confident decisions. And then we just got to continue. I believe that growth is so facilitated by accountability and organization of the data going forward. So just keeping your financial life in order, knowing, what loans you have, what rates they are, the terms of those loans, if there's balloon payments, and, instead of just letting things fly and go loose and like saying, hey, I got to add another chair. That means I got to go build something out. I got to go get another loan. I just had a client who refinanced 12 of her loans. She had 12 practice loans. I think she added 6 operatories, and each time she got a new loan for each one of them from Clarion. And then she had a bunch of equipment loans and one SBA loan, one regular Bank of America loan. And it was just a total mess. She was like, her average interest rate was up around 7 or 8%.
Holy cow.
And it was like these crazy terms, anywhere from 5 to 25 years. And so she got to this point where she was super successful, startup practice. It was going really well. But she just felt overwhelmed. She didn't know what was going on. And so that was where we got involved and helped her clean some of that up. We just refinanced over $1 million at like 3%. I mean, we didn't personally refinance, but we helped her along with the process. And she got over $1 million at like 3%, which obviously interest rates are great right now, so take advantage. But it's been cool to see the peace of mind that organization and accountability to the data have brought, and allowing her to focus more on, the clinical side, which ultimately was her goal. She wanted to focus on being a dentist and not worry about all these other factors of insurances and debts and cash flow and all these things. So
I love that example. And I mean, now I'm interested, if she had been organized from the beginning, or if someone is looking to expand, they know, okay, I'm going to need to add some equipment here, I'm going to need to add an operatory here. What are some other ways that they could structure that going into it, rather than just like, okay, wherever I can get the money, here, get it done? at the end of the day, the person got it done and they expanded and they kept up capacity. So you can't blame them too much. But is there a more strategic way to expand if you know you're going to have some costs that are just going to come in certain chunks along your road?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I would just say plan ahead. I don't know if it's the wrong decision to have certain chunks come at like certain times, but I would just say be more cognizant of like what's coming up rather than like being reactive to, oh, like crap, we have all these patients booked out and we need to add another operatory. So let's just get whatever interest rate they'll give us and like just go with it because that's our only option to add this operatory in the next month or two. And so I would just say planning ahead, maybe having a better grasp on what's coming and seeing, rather than being reactive, be proactive on things that you do. Because I don't know, maybe Reese can speak to how you would avoid that.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's more of a success story than one where, this is an example where 9 times out of 10, this customer, this dentist doesn't actually have a dental specific financial advisor to begin with. They wouldn't have a financial advisor who would be able to identify the problem and then fix it. So I think the main thing to kind of comment on this for me would be, 9 times out of 10, this person works with a general financial advisor and this financial advisor is like, I don't know, let's set up a 401k. And the real problem wasn't that there wasn't a 401k in place. It was that we had like massive interest rate expense. The overall like weighted average maturity of all the loans combined was, either too short or too long. Interest expense was too high. Yeah. But like you can't overstate the importance of someone like Will, who's got like only dental market knowledge and expertise. Like you put 10 financial advisors in that situation, like unless they've seen maybe 30 or 40 different dental cases, like they're not going to find this solution. They're just going to be like,
how much money's left over? Where do we save
How much you got left over? Where should we put it? Let's do a 401k.
Right.
And so there's just a lot of critical, I think, things that come by having like industry expertise. And that's where I think this person probably did a good job of hiring someone relatively early before it got out of control. So
right. No, and it was probably a pain point of like, man, just keeping track of 12 different payments, like that stress right there, probably pushed this person towards, hey, I need help. I need to get organized. But
some dentists are never going to like get to this problem because they're like, maybe some of you listening are like, dude, I would never do that. Like, I'm so organized. Like I got all my stuff in a spreadsheet and I'm tracking everything perfectly. I mean, that type of person is unusual. If that's you, you're unusual, and good for you for being like so particular about all of your stuff. But most people, the average person, this is not the priority. And let's have some humility here. The person who's maybe neglecting that stuff might actually be producing the most. Because they're not obsessing over these other things.
Dentistry,
like really focused. And so anyway.
Well, and I also will say that there's a certain point where it's like general advice really hits its limitations, where like we had a car that died during the middle of COVID, and I'm texting Will and I'm like, crap, I need to buy a new vehicle. Like we need a minivan for our family. Should I do a lease? Should I just buy one new? Should I find one used? Like, and Will, knowing my situation, we went back and forth and we figured out, okay, I found a recently, it was a 2019 Sienna with 17,000 miles on it. And I put 10K down on it and then financed the rest because it was like young enough of a used car. The interest rate was like 2.5%, but just having someone that like knows your complete financial situation and your liquidity needs and your future plans and can help you make a little decision like that, instead of going all in, I'm like, all cash or finance the whole thing or just buy the new car or whatever. Having that perspective of here's your whole situation, here's what you're trying to do, here's this one expense that isn't going to make or break you, but if you can make that decision in context of your overall plan, it's a better decision.
Yeah. And I finances are like an emotional thing, and Richard, this, but we talk about functional jobs and emotional jobs.
Yeah.
In financial planning, there's like this example you just gave of talking to Will. You guys completed a functional job, which was financing a car and getting it done and making a down payment. But there was an emotional job there that was also important, probably more important than the functional job, which is, I know I didn't screw this decision up.
Yeah.
Like, I know this decision was thoughtful, customized, and appropriate. And so I can move on now. And I'll put my emotional energy towards the next thing. What ends up happening for a lot of people is these emotional jobs of, I know I did the right thing. They never get that closed loop. And so they just start packing up these emotional jobs that are not completed of like, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing on the practice refinance, on the car purchase, on the associate ad, on the expansion of my operatories, on the financing? And you just start carrying this heavy weight, an emotional weight of like, am I doing the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
And it slows down your focus into your practice and your production and your efficiency, because you're kind of carrying these weights in your backpack and they get heavier and heavier. And so I think it's important to kind of maybe voice that or expose people to that may not have thought about the role that a financial advisor plays is often an emotional, like release of baggage that like you're carrying because you are delaying making decisions with confidence. You know, you're not done with the decisions because they really weren't really thoughtfully made, you know. So
and I've loved, like, that's been one of my favorite things is having a very good sense of, okay, I'm working on liquidity right now, and then after that I know what my next step is, and I feel really good about these decisions. And then when another financial decision pops up, making that in the framework of, I've got a good plan that I'm making progress on. And this isn't going to interrupt my plan or stop my plan. It's just part of the plan.
yeah.
That's a really good feeling, and it feels completely different than the flying by the seat of your pants and just questioning yourself after every major financial decision.
Yeah. Will, can you relate to that emotional, like, kind of part of the job? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. And then I don't mean to belabor this point, but I think it's critical.
No, I love that. I think like I think your like podcast motto for the Dentist Money Show is helping dentists make smart financial decisions. And I really liked what you said. I think I would just add the word confident in front of that. So like confident, smart financial decisions. Because I totally believe that. Like if you are organized and you have all the data in front of you, and like Richard said, you have a plan, and this is all just in context of a bigger picture of where you're headed and where you want to get, you can be confident in every single thing you're doing if you basically just have somebody who can, like Richard, actually, you got to give yourself a little more credit. Like you had like a really good plan for the van. Like you said, look, I think this is what I want to do. Can you basically confirm with me that this is right? And, it was fine. But I think you were looking for that like confirmation that what you were doing was a good idea. And it worked out. And obviously, like, it fit within your bigger plan of what we're looking at. And ultimately, like, I would say, we deliver a lot of services. You can go to our website and find like all of our services that we deliver. And there are a bunch of like, PDFs and updates and things that we'll do. But like, I wish we had a thing that was like, ultimately what we're delivering is peace of mind. Like that's like the end goal of a financial plan to me. And I know that's like more mushy gushy than like, we can't really sell that. Like, hey, we're giving you peace of mind. But like, ultimately that's it. Like with a good financial plan comes peace of mind and just knowing that you're headed towards reaching your goals. So.
Awesome. No, well, so Reese, I wanted to circle back to one thing that we talked about pre-recording. We talk about growth, we talk about leading towards this end state. You've seen clients go through all these different phases and then exit on the back end or do a sellout to a DSO. And a lot of times there's a lot of expectations of like what this is going to be, or maybe people haven't thought about what's this going to be like on the back end. And you were sharing some specifics. I don't know what you can share here, but about someone who entered into a relationship with the DSO for their practice sale and was on the back end of that. And it was a little different than maybe they thought it would be.
Yeah, I think this is, again, an example of where a dental specific financial advisor who understands their role as a confidence provider or an emotional support, like, it makes a big difference. I had this particular person I had been talking to for quite a while prior to the transaction of them exiting. And they're actually financially in a good situation prior to the transition and post. I would say they needed the transition, they needed the exit in order to be really financially independent. But they were
Deal.
in a really, it was kind of icing on the cake for their whole life's work. And it was a very emotional up and down decision to choose to exit to begin with. Do I maintain this autonomy? Of my own practice that I can control and bring on my own associate and expand more? Or do I really, just move on? A lot of the DSO transactions have work back requirements, maybe some rollover stock, some liquidity event combined with some stock. And we went through the rounds on this negotiation, for quite a while, getting what we thought was the perfect exit that represented exactly what the doctor was wanting to have happen. And anyway, the transaction occurred. It was probably 2 days after the transaction that I got a phone call, and you could just tell that this doctor had hit a point of personal concern that was very, they were really worried about what they had just done. And the work up to that point was months and months and months of back and forth and why not, and is this a good idea or not. And we have a lot of reasons why we moved forward with the decision. And I don't think that this doctor anticipated the feeling of what it might be like to have such a dramatic shift occur in their life, to where now they don't have control. Now they don't really have equity value anymore. Moving the needle of their practice, seeing profitability happen, there's a difference in how that feels, because now you're on a salary to some degree, right? You're not capturing all the profits you had before. And I remember having this conversation, and the most important thing I think for people to go away with from this is that because we went through a process that was very methodical and based on data, and we had spent months analyzing this decision, even though the first few days after were really scary, we were able to reference why we made the decision and the process we went through. And you're not crazy for making this choice. You made the choice knowing all of these variables, right? You made the choice knowing all of this data, and you still went through with it, even after questioning it for months and months and months. Like, you're in a good spot. This wasn't a bad choice. All choices have consequences, right? We talked a lot about, I wrote a blog post recently about chaos and order, yin and yang, and kind of the difference between, how life feels when we in life, we go between these systems of order and systems of chaos. That's what yin and yang Chinese philosophy is all about. Sometimes it feels good to be stable and consistent, have my small practice with no associates, and it's just me, and I'm doing my own hygiene, and I do my own insurance collections, and I run my own front desk.
That doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound like it ever feels good.
That would be like an extreme version of order.
Yeah.
No chaos at all, because you're controlling every step of the way. You wouldn't be very big, but maybe another version of order would be, I don't have an associate in my life, and then you introduce associate, or you introduce something that creates chaos. You get nervous, you get worried, you get stressed. And it's important, I think, to really think through each step of the way, what you want to have happen in your own life. Because if this decision would have been made without a lot of analysis, there'd be nothing to resort back to know why it was a good thing. We've talked about it for several days, and, since then it's been months, and this person's totally fine, really stoked about where they're at. They're really happy, and everything is going well as planned. But it hasn't been it hasn't been easy since that transaction. So I think anytime you have big change in your life, whether it's, maybe on both sides of this transaction, though, there could be a right and wrong answer for some of you. It's not always right to go through with it, and it's not always wrong to go through with it. But each person has very unique characteristics. This person had characteristics that they were getting very bored. They were very far long way down their career. They were very mature. They were ready for a new phase, a new chapter. They didn't need to keep working forever. This was a very, very attractive offer. This was a very, very attractive time to make this exit happen with a very good group. There's all these great variables in play. It wasn't super early stage with, trying to figure out what this person wanted to be when they grew up. This was someone who was looking for that next stage in their life. And I wouldn't make that same recommendation to someone who's in their, mid 30s, maybe, who's trying to figure out the next chapter in their life, or the first chapter in their life, or who they are really, or what drives them, what motivates them. Because like we said earlier, I think you could make a great living at any of these phases. But it was surprising to me how, even after a lot of research and a lot of time, that on the other side of this transaction, there was a lot of fear, regret, worry that we had done it wrong, can't unwind this, life is over, this is going to be bad. And it's good to have, I think, an advisor there while you go through your life and go through these emotionally volatile moments, that somebody like Will or me, who like really understand dentistry, and you, the person that we're coaching or advising, can make sure that we don't ever leave you feeling like you're making the wrong decision, because we won't tell you it's the right decision if we don't believe that it is. But we can help you remember that the decision we made is the right decision based on all the information we had available, and help you move on and keep going forward instead of rehashing the past all the time, so, and that's kind of a long story, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, and I think it goes back to having a vision, having a plan, and having context with the appropriate advisors. And so we've moved into coaching. We've helped people move through these different phases and gone from a small solo practice to a big solo practice, or from a solo practice to a multi-doc practice. And those transitions have a lot of those moments of, oh crap, what are we doing? And is this the right thing? And what have I done? And, I've expanded, I've adopted these costs, and there's a lot of those moments where having context that, okay, there's a plan, this is why we're doing this, this is where we're going, makes all the difference. And I'm a big fan of coaching from multiple aspects, and that's, your financial advisor working with someone like you guys, or I just tell people to work with you guys. Or then in addition, other aspects of your life, having those coaches, advisors, makes a huge difference. But
I think the financial part for me in this particular example, if I didn't bring financial context to this conversation, it wouldn't have been enough context for him to feel good.
Yeah.
Like, he needed the financial context to feel like everything was going to be okay.
And right.
I think I was able to say, you're going to be fine, and here's why. Anyway, Will, what were you doing there?
I just love that, because it's just it really is a mirror image of a lot of like decisions I've seen clients make over the past year or so, especially with COVID and everything that's happened. Like, there have been a lot of decisions that have need to be made. And a lot of them are these emotional decisions. And whether it's, deciding to sell to a DSO, or have your spouse stop working because, you want to spend more time with the kids. Like, there's so much, every decision has an emotional side to it, and like sort of a mathematical financial side to it, like you were saying. And it's our job to hopefully expose the two and find the right balance between the two, because I would hate in my own personal life to be making every single big decision on my own and not have somebody who's a non-emotional third party there to help me, through these decisions that, are going to really be life-changing. So
yeah. Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, thank you both for coming on the podcast. This was really insightful. I thought you guys shared some great specific examples of how that perspective makes all the difference, and how there's I loved that kind of emotional job, that emotional factor to all of these decisions, and the feeling of confidence that like I've got a plan, we're making progress on that plan, and as these bumps occur, and as these moments of regret and doubt occur, going back to that plan makes all the difference, and it changes very much the experience of being in that moment of pushing through those challenging times and those hard times. So thank you for coming on the show. This was great.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I'll leave you my parting thoughts, and I'd like to let Will share his. But just to button that up, I think that the emotional confidence you have lets you then the emotional confidence you have in your finances lets you kind of pivot back to the family, to the kids, to the vacations, to the life, that you want to live, and just like be present. I mean, if you haven't learned one thing from today, Will and I are like hyper focused on what it means to actually live in the present, like what it means to live now, like in the next hour, like today, this afternoon, this morning, whenever you get done listening to this podcast, like I hope you're in the moment with the person that you are talking to 1 hour from now, whether that's a patient, a spouse, a friend. I hope you're in the moment listening to this. Like life is not, it doesn't feel good to always be living in the past or living in the future. Like it feels good to live now, like enjoy this hour. Right. Mm. And financial confidence is what allows you to stay present. It's a big part of what allows you. I don't think it's the only thing, but it's a big factor. So that's why we have designed our business in an occupational focus. That's why people like Will, are dedicating his entire career to serving that vertical, and really diving deep into knowing everything about a dentist's life. It's the way our planning process is designed to focus on present kind of metrics and not forecast things out too far. And we want people to live in the moment, and that's what having confidence allows you to do. So it's not just about feeling good about your money. It's about living your best life and enjoying what it feels like to actually be at peace, rest, sit there, enjoy that hour that you haven't been able to like enjoy because you've got so much anxiety and tension built up. Anyway, thanks, Richard, for having me. I'll let you and Will wrap up, but I appreciate you letting me share those thoughts.
Thank you, Reese. Yeah, that was great.
That was beautiful. And there's like somebody, maybe one of your kids playing the piano in the background, and it started like right when you were getting into the meat of that. So
music, your background music.
That was like meant to be. Yeah, that was beautiful.
That's funny. They're working on their skills.
Well, thanks, Richard. That was awesome.
Cool. That's it. Will, yeah, I agree. How do you talk?
Yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Well, I really had a blast, and I feel that I have absolutely been able to live more in the moment by working with you guys. So thank you for the advice and for everything you guys have done. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Will.
See you guys.
See you guys.